Michael Jeffrey Jordan. His airness. The basketball god. For 3 decades, we've celebrated the myth of the unbeatable player. 6 championships, 5 MVPs, a man who seemingly never knew defeat. But what if I told you that before becoming the greatest champion in basketball history, Michael Jordan was broken? Not physically, but psychologically. That he had to endure brutal humiliation year after year to finally become the legend we know today? This is the story of how the Detroit Pistons, the infamous bad boys, tried to destroy Michael Jordan and instead forged the most ruthless champion basketball has ever seen. And then came April 20th, 1986. Game 2 of the first-round playoffs. The Boston Garden, home of the defending champions. What happened next would enter basketball folklore. 63 points. Against the best defense in basketball. Larry Bird, after witnessing this performance, said something that would define Jordan's early career. "I think it's just God disguised as Michael Jordan." God, disguised as Michael Jordan. The narrative was set. Jordan was untouchable, unstoppable, invincible. But 500 miles north, in the gritty city of Detroit, a group of players and their mastermind coach Chuck Daly were about to challenge that narrative. They called themselves the Bad Boys, and they had a plan to prove that even God could bleed. If you're fascinated by the untold stories behind basketball's greatest legends, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We dive deep into the moments that shaped the game's most iconic figures, revealing the human drama behind the highlight reels. Don't miss our upcoming breakdown of how Kobe Bryant's rivalry with Shaquille O'Neal nearly destroyed the Lakers dynasty. By 1988, Michael Jordan had established himself as the most electrifying player in the NBA, but there was one team that refused to bow down to his individual brilliance. The Detroit Pistons, led by the tactical genius Chuck Daly, had been studying Jordan's game with the intensity of military strategists preparing for war. What they developed would become known as the Jordan Rules, a defensive philosophy so brutal and effective that it would push the greatest player of all time to his psychological breaking point. The concept was deceptively simple but devastatingly effective. First, force Jordan to his left hand at all costs. Every screen, every defensive rotation, every help defender had one primary objective: eliminate Jordan's dominant right hand and make him uncomfortable. Second, whenever Jordan touched the ball in the paint, immediately send a second defender. No clean looks, no easy baskets, no matter what. Third, and perhaps most importantly, make every trip to the basket a painful experience. This wasn't just about stopping Jordan from scoring. It was about breaking his will. The Pistons understood that Jordan's greatest strength was also his potential weakness. His relentless drive to attack the basket could be turned against him if they made every drive a war of attrition. Rick Mahorn, Bill Laimbeer, Dennis Rodman, and the rest of the bad boys weren't just trying to play defense. They were trying to send a message. Every hard foul, every elbow, every late hit was carefully calculated to plant a seed of doubt in Jordan's mind. Would he really want to drive to the basket, knowing what was waiting for him? The results were immediate and devastating. In their first playoff meeting in 1988, the Pistons took Jordan and the Bulls to 5 games, with Jordan's shooting efficiency dropping significantly under the constant pressure. But this was just the beginning. In 1989, the Eastern Conference Finals became a nightmare for Jordan. Despite averaging over 29 points per game, his field goal percentage plummeted as the Pistons' suffocating defense took its toll. The Bulls lost in 6 games, but more importantly, cracks were beginning to show in Jordan's psychological armor. By 1990, the crisis reached its peak. The Eastern Conference Finals that year would become the defining moment of Jordan's early career, not for what he accomplished, but for how completely he was neutralized. Game after game, the Pistons implemented their Jordan rules with surgical precision. Double teams came from unexpected angles. Hard fouls arrived milliseconds after every drive. The constant physical punishment began to wear down not just Jordan's body, but his confidence. His shooting percentage in that series dropped to career-low levels, and for the first time in his professional career, Michael Jordan looked human. Perhaps even more damaging than the physical beating was the psychological warfare. Isaiah Thomas and the Pistons had gotten inside Jordan's head. They celebrated every missed shot, taunted him after every turnover, and made it clear that his individual brilliance meant nothing if he couldn't elevate his teammates. The series ended with the Bulls' season over once again, and Jordan walking off the court with a look of complete dejection. This wasn't just another playoff loss. This was a complete systematic dismantling of everything Jordan thought he knew about basketball. After the 1990 defeat, Jordan retreated from the spotlight in a way that was completely uncharacteristic. The player who had always been supremely confident began to question everything about his game and his approach to basketball. He spoke privately about feeling trapped by the Pistons' defense, about the frustration of knowing exactly what they were going to do, but being powerless to stop it. For the first time in his career, Michael Jordan was facing the possibility that individual greatness might not be enough. The bad boys had succeeded where no other team had. They had broken the spirit of the man many considered unbreakable. If this story of Jordan's transformation changed how you view greatness in sports, smash that like button. It helps us bring you more deep dives into the psychological battles that created basketball legends. Your support keeps these untold stories coming. The summer of 1990 marked the darkest period of Michael Jordan's career, but also became the catalyst for the most dramatic transformation in basketball history. Broken by 3 consecutive playoff defeats to the Pistons, Jordan faced a crossroads that would define not just his legacy, but his very identity as a player. The man who had always relied on his individual brilliance was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Being the best player in the world wasn't enough if he couldn't make his teammates better. What followed was a complete reconstruction of Michael Jordan, both physically and mentally. Jordan returned to Chicago that summer with a new obsession: strength training. Working with trainer Tim Grover, he added nearly 15 pounds of muscle to his frame, transforming from a lean, athletic slasher into a more powerful, imposing presence. But the physical transformation was only part of the equation. The real change was happening in Jordan's mind. For years, he had resisted Phil Jackson's triangle offense, viewing it as a system that would diminish his individual impact. The triangle required patience, ball movement, and trust in teammates, qualities that didn't come naturally to someone who had succeeded by taking over games single-handedly. But the Pistons had taught him that even the most talented individual could be neutralized by the right team strategy. If he wanted to beat Detroit, he needed to become something more than just Michael Jordan. He needed to become a leader who could elevate an entire team. The 1990-91 season became Jordan's laboratory for this new approach. Instead of forcing shots against double teams, he began finding the open man. Instead of trying to score every crucial basket himself, he started trusting Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant, and his supporting cast to make plays. The statistics told the story of his evolution. His assist numbers jumped significantly, while his scoring remained elite. But more importantly, the Bulls began winning games in ways they never had before. The transformation wasn't just tactical, it was philosophical. Jordan began to understand that the Pistons' Jordan rules worked because they isolated him from his teammates. By making basketball a one-on-one battle between Jordan and Detroit's defense, they had eliminated the other 4 Bulls players from the equation. Jordan's new approach flipped this script entirely. When double teams came, he welcomed them, knowing that somewhere on the court, a teammate would have a clean look. When the Pistons tried to make the game physical, Jordan used his new strength and improved post-game to punish them in ways they hadn't expected. The regular season success was impressive, but everyone knew the real test would come in the playoffs. When the Bulls and Pistons met again in the 1991 Eastern Conference Finals, it was clear that something fundamental had changed. The same Jordan rules that had stifled Jordan for 3 straight years suddenly seemed outdated and ineffective. Jordan's improved strength allowed him to power through contact that had previously knocked him off balance. His enhanced court vision meant that double teams now became opportunities rather than obstacles. Most importantly, his teammates had developed the confidence and skill to capitalize on the advantages his presence created. Game after game, the Bulls systematically dismantled the Pistons' defensive philosophy. What had once been Detroit's greatest weapon became their weakness as Jordan turned their aggression against them. The series culminated in a moment that transcended basketball, a complete four-game sweep of the defending champions. But the most telling moment came not during the games themselves, but in their aftermath. As the final seconds ticked away in Game 4, with the Bulls' victory assured, several key Pistons players, including Isaiah Thomas, walked off the court without acknowledging the Bulls or congratulating them on their victory. It was a moment of poor sportsmanship that would define the end of the Bad Boys era, but more importantly, it symbolized the completion of Jordan's transformation. The man who had been broken and humiliated by these same players 3 years earlier was now standing victorious, having beaten them not through individual heroics, but through the kind of complete team basketball that the Pistons themselves had shown him was necessary for championship success. Jordan's metamorphosis was complete, but its true test still lay ahead: the NBA Finals against Magic Johnson and the Los Angeles Lakers. The lessons Michael Jordan learned during his torturous battles with the Detroit Pistons became the foundation for everything that followed in his legendary career. The psychological fortitude forged in those brutal Eastern Conference Finals wars would manifest itself in countless crucial moments over the next 7 years, turning a supremely talented individual into the most clutch performer in basketball history. Perhaps no single game better illustrated this transformation than Game 5 of the 1997 NBA Finals, forever remembered as the flu game. Battling severe illness and dehydration, Jordan could have easily succumbed to the physical adversity, just as he had done against the Pistons in his early years. Instead, he drew upon the mental toughness that had been hammered into him through those painful defeats, willing himself to score 38 points and lead the Bulls to a crucial victory over the Utah Jazz. The man who had once been broken by physical punishment now used that same adversity as fuel for his greatest performances. The contrast between Jordan's two most iconic playoff moments perfectly encapsulates his evolution from talented individual to complete champion. The shot against Cleveland in 1989 was pure individual brilliance, a young superstar taking over a crucial moment through sheer talent and will. It was a promise of greatness, a glimpse of what Jordan could become, but it came during a period when his individual excellence hadn't yet translated to team success. The Pistons were waiting in the next round to remind him that basketball was still a team game. Nearly a decade later, the last shot against Utah in 1998 represented something entirely different, the culmination of everything Jordan had learned about winning championships. The sequence itself told the story of his growth. First, he stripped the ball from Karl Malone, showing the defensive intensity he had developed. Then, rather than immediately attacking, he surveyed the court with the patience the triangle offense had taught him. Finally, when the moment called for individual brilliance, he delivered with a fadeaway jumper that sealed his 6th championship. But what made the moment truly special wasn't just the shot itself. It was the complete basketball IQ and leadership that Jordan had developed through years of learning how to make his teammates better. The transformation from 1989 to 1998 wasn't just about Jordan becoming a better shooter or defender. It was about him learning to harness his individual greatness in service of team success. The Bulls' 6 championships weren't won despite Jordan's dominance, but because of how he learned to channel that dominance into championship basketball. However, this evolution came with a cost that wouldn't be fully understood until years later. The same relentless drive that allowed Jordan to overcome the Pistons' psychological warfare also created what Scottie Pippen would later describe as an obsession with winning at any cost. The perfectionism that served Jordan so well on the court began to manifest itself as an almost pathological need to control every aspect of his team's preparation and performance. Stories emerged of Jordan's treatment of teammates during practice, his refusal to accept anything less than total commitment from every player on the roster, and his willingness to use psychological intimidation to push his teammates to their limits. The documentary The Last Dance would later reveal the extent to which Jordan's pursuit of perfection had consumed not just his own life, but the lives of everyone around him. The man who had learned to trust his teammates had also learned to demand their absolute best, often through methods that mirrored the psychological pressure the Pistons had once applied to him. In many ways, Jordan had internalized the lessons of his tormentors, becoming his own version of the bad boys' mental warfare, but directed at his own team in pursuit of championship excellence. This duality, the inspiring leader who elevated his teammates and the demanding perfectionist who sometimes broke them, became the defining characteristic of Jordan's championship years. The same intensity that allowed him to overcome 3 straight defeats to Detroit also drove him to push teammates like Will Perdue and Scott Burrell to tears during practice sessions. The psychological fortitude that made him clutch in crucial moments also made him unforgiving of teammates who couldn't match his level of commitment and performance. Yet for all the criticism of his methods, the results spoke for themselves. The Chicago Bulls of the 1990s became the most dominant dynasty in modern basketball history, winning 6 championships in 8 years and setting a standard for excellence that has never been matched. Every player who won a championship alongside Jordan, despite the demanding nature of his leadership, acknowledged that they had achieved something that wouldn't have been possible without his relentless pursuit of perfection. The legacy of Jordan's battles with the bad boys extended far beyond his individual career, influencing an entire generation of basketball players and fans. The idea that greatness required overcoming adversity, that championship success demanded both individual excellence and team chemistry, became fundamental principles of basketball culture. Young players grew up understanding that talent alone wasn't enough, that true greatness required the kind of mental toughness that could only be forged through facing and overcoming seemingly impossible challenges. In the end, the Detroit Pistons' attempt to break Michael Jordan had accomplished something far more significant than they ever intended. By pushing him to his psychological breaking point, they had forced him to evolve from a supremely talented individual into the most complete winner in basketball history. What other NBA legend do you think was forged through adversity? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Was there another player who had their own bad boys moment that transformed their career? Let's discuss the hidden stories that shaped basketball history. The story of Michael Jordan's transformation from individual superstar to championship legend is ultimately not a tale of natural greatness, but of manufactured resilience. When we celebrate Jordan's 6 championships, his 5 MVP awards, and his countless clutch performances, we are really celebrating the end result of a brutal education administered by the Detroit Pistons between 1988 and 1991. Without those 3 devastating playoff defeats, without the humiliation of being systematically neutralized by the Jordan rules, without the psychological breaking point that forced him to completely reimagine his approach to basketball, Michael Jordan might have remained nothing more than a supremely talented scorer who never learned how to win at the highest level. The bad boys didn't just beat Jordan, they created him. Every fadeaway jumper in a crucial moment, every pass to an open teammate instead of forcing a difficult shot, every display of mental toughness in the face of adversity could be traced back to those painful lessons learned in the Palace of Auburn Hills. The man who became known as the most clutch performer in sports history was forged in the fires of repeated failure, shaped by opponents who understood that breaking someone's spirit was more effective than simply beating them on the scoreboard. What makes Jordan's transformation even more remarkable is how completely he internalized these lessons, eventually becoming his own version of the psychological pressure that had once broken him. The demanding leadership style that characterized his championship years, the refusal to accept anything less than total commitment from teammates, the ability to use mental warfare as a motivational tool, all of these qualities were learned through his battles with Detroit. In essence, Jordan defeated the Pistons by becoming them, channeling their relentless intensity and psychological manipulation into his own pursuit of perfection. The irony of the bad boys' legacy is that their greatest victory was also their ultimate defeat. By pushing Jordan to evolve beyond individual greatness into complete championship leadership, they created not just a better player, but a more dominant dynasty than they themselves had ever achieved. The Detroit Pistons won 2 championships during their bad boys era, But the Michael Jordan they helped create went on to win 6, establishing a standard of excellence that made their own accomplishments seem modest by comparison. Perhaps the most profound lesson of this entire saga is that greatness is not about avoiding failure, but about how we respond to it. Jordan's early career defeats to the Pistons could have ended his championship aspirations permanently, convincing him that individual brilliance would never be enough to overcome superior team basketball. Instead, those defeats became the foundation for a complete reconstruction of his approach to the game, transforming him from a player who happened to be great into a great player who understood how to win. The legend of Michael Jordan is not really about his successes. It's about his ability to learn from his most devastating failures and use them as stepping stones to even greater achievements. In the end, the Detroit Pistons set out to prove that even the most talented individual could be stopped by the right team strategy and sufficient psychological pressure. They succeeded beyond their wildest expectations, breaking down Michael Jordan's confidence and forcing him to confront the limitations of pure individual excellence. But in their moment of triumph, they inadvertently created something far more dangerous than the player they had defeated. They had taken the most competitive athlete of his generation, given him a complete education in both the technical and psychological aspects of championship basketball, and then sent him back onto the court with an unquenchable thirst for revenge and vindication. The bad boys wanted to break Michael Jordan. Instead, they forged the most relentless champion basketball has ever seen.